안녕하세요. 이디엠아이엘츠 Johnny입니다. Hello, my name is Johnny and I'm going to take you through the speaking section of the IELTS test today. Okay. So, in the speaking section there are 4 parts. The first being your fluency and coherence. So fluency being like your flow of English, having a nice natural flow. And your coherence is how your ideas link together. It's very important. The next part is the lexical resource. So that will be your vocabulary. Having a wide range of vocabulary is very important with your answer. It really adds substance and strength to your answer. The next bit we have is your grammatical range and accuracy. So this is knowing when to use which grammar tense. So a quick tip in this is to listen carefully to the examiner. If he asks you a question in the present perfect, answer in the present perfect. The last part is your pronunciation, another very important part. So you should always speak at a pace that's comfortable to you so you can make the examiner understand your English. Okay? So we're going to look at the next bit. So we're going to look at a section today called phrasal verbs. So phrasal verbs are very common in spoken English. They're very natural and it will impress the examiner rather than formal English. So they're extremely common and they'll give your answers a better flow and feel. So as opposed to more book-learned words, phrasal verbs are used every day by native speakers and they will really strengthen your answer. So they're made up by having a base verb and a preposition and they're put together. For example, turn on, turn off. That is an example of a simple phrasal verb. So we're going to look at some phrasal verbs now today. So the first one we're going to look at, the base verb is get. Okay, so get is a very common phrasal verb. So we're going to look at 3 of them today. The first one being get in, get in. So this maybe have a couple of meanings. You can get in a car. Okay, it can also mean to arrive, to arrive. So for example, my flight got in at around 9 p.m. on Thursday night. My flight got in. So this sounds a bit more natural than my flight arrived at 9 p.m. My flight got in. The next one is to get by. It means to manage, to survive. So for example, look at a business that is not very successful, but it's making enough money to survive, to pay the rent, to pay the employees. It's getting by, getting by. The last one is to get around. It means to go from place to place. For example, it's quite easy to get around Seoul. The public transportation is great. Yeah? To go from here, from there. Yeah? So these sentences sound a lot more natural than my flight arrived. I have enough money to survive. They sound very, very natural and like something a native speaker would say. Okay? So let's use a phrasal verb to answer a part 1 question. So how is the public transportation in your city? So let's go. So intonation is also very important here. When you're answering your question, make sure you're using an upward intonation or a downward intonation. So this one, oh, it's fantastic. It's fantastic. There are plenty of options to choose from. Taxis, buses, and the subway are all quite cheap. Yeah? So you'd be emphasizing plenty. There are plenty of options. You could also say, so it's quite cheap and convenient, so it's really easy to get around. Yeah, so Seoul is easy to get around. The airport is also connected to the subway. So if your plane gets in before 11, then you can be in the city in an hour. Yeah? So it just makes your answer sound a bit more natural and it's definitely good to use. The next one we're going to look at is take, another very common one. So the first one is take off. So 2 meanings to this phrasal verb. Some phrasal verbs will have 2 meanings. First one, to remove shoes or clothing. You know, when the weather gets hot, I take off my coat. The other meaning is when a plane leaves the ground. So you will hear the captain speaking. He will say, prepare for takeoff. Prepare for takeoff. So in Korea, it's a custom to take off your shoes when you enter a house. Okay? The next one is take on, which means to hire someone. So when a company gets busy, they need to take on extra staff. So every Christmas, my company takes on temporary staff to deal with the Christmas rush. Okay? So this would be hire temporary staff. And also you have deal with. is also highlighted here because it's another phrasal verb. Deal with means to like sort out a problem, to sort out. And the last one is to take up, to start to do or to learn something. So I plan to take up photography during the summer. Yeah? I plan to start learning photography. Yeah? So these are all very common as well. So let's look at an answer using some of these. So this is a part 2 question. So we know part 2 you have to speak for 2 minutes, but in this example I'm giving you a short example. It's describe a sport you would like to learn. Okay? So we'll start off. Well, I've always been quite active and took part in a lot of sports as a child. So I took part. So this is using a phrasal verb in the past. When I was a child, I'd done a lot of sports. Yeah? One sport I've always been fascinated by. So that's another way of saying interested in. We can use fascinated by. But never played is badminton. I actually plan to take it up in the winter time because it's an indoor sport, so Korea's freezing winter won't stop me. So it's very important in this part to add some detail to your answer. Because it's a 2-minute answer, you have to provide a lot of detail. So add in things like when you're going to do it. You're going to do it in the winter. And why winter? Because of the freezing weather. Yeah? Also, I was planning on taking up badminton last winter, but I didn't get around to it. Didn't get around to it, meaning I didn't have time for it. Didn't get around to it because of a busy work schedule. And so let's look at another one. I'm pretty sure that this won't happen this year because my company has recently taken on a few new employees. Okay? So this is, remember, this is hire. This is again. So if you look here, you will notice it's has. So we have to go has taken on because it's a present perfect sentence. Okay? Let's just review and things to remember with phrasal verbs. Okay? So the first thing, so phrasal verbs are like normal verbs. They need to be changed according to tense. So the example I said there, for example, has taken on is correct, not has took on. So be careful when you're changing your verbs. The next one, sometimes the object can go either between the phrasal verb or at the end. So I'm going to take badminton up. That's perfect. I'm going to take up badminton. That's fine. But when you use a pronoun, it cannot be put at the end. So take it up, also that's fine, but take up it is not correct. So just be careful when you switch to a pronoun, don't put it in the end in most of these cases. Okay? Yeah, so we'll finish up today. That's our lesson on phrasal verbs, and I hope you learned a few tips that can help you in the speaking exam. 감사합니다.